Should I not curse so much? You probably not, because
Cat's out of the bag on that one.
if it's, I mean,
This is a project that I'm really proud of and grateful to have been a part of, and all the people that were a part of this to make this happen.
One of the most dramatic transformations that I've ever seen from a land restoration standpoint, and
is thinking about not just drainage but water infiltration when we're doing new constructions of any kind.
trying to plant crepe myrtles or Kentucky bluegrass or whatever garbage from somewhere else is an uphill battle. It doesn't make any sense. Look at this, man. This is not soil. This is like porous calcareous rock.
This video is made possible by our patrons. Their support allows us to continue to share our educational resources, knowledge, and make these videos for you to enjoy. We have just launched our new tier of support. To get access to additional content from our projects, Q&A priority, and more, click the link below. Joey from Crime Pays But Botany Doesn't joins us as we revisit the Quarry site about 7 months since the last time we've been there, and he gets mauled by a bunch of dogs in the process. There's a fair amount of foul language in this video, so viewer discretion is advised.
All right, so we're back at the Aldridge project, the old quarry site that we've been working on. And I'm just really pleasantly surprised once again to see how well the berms have grown in. And it's been, I think, less than a year that we've gotten this kind of growth from just pure caliche rock to a wildflower meadow in the purest sense of the word. So I'm excited to get down there and see everything that's growing.
this is by far one of the most dramatic transformations that I've ever seen from a land restoration standpoint, and I'm really excited to use this as a case study to understand what we did right here and how just sort of everything came together so that we can do this again, because going from where we were at to where we are now in this short of amount of time, if you can do that every single time, that is just a home run. I don't know of anyone else who's getting these results in Texas right now.
You can see the swale's capturing a ton of moisture. It's still wet in there. And that's really nice to see. All the water coming off of this there's a construction happening right there. The house is being built, so there's ample amount of opportunity for erosion, for sediment to fall off, and all that water is being captured right here and irrigating this incredible waist-high, even shoulder-high in some places, wildflower meadow. So this is just a good angle where you can see that this swale that's capturing water from that whole hillside is slowly going to deposit it into this pond area. And we haven't had that much rain this year, but when we do get a large rain event, this property is going to be able to actually handle and benefit from it. Whereas a lot of folks, unfortunately, because the soil is degraded, the ecology is not intact, when there's a lot of rain, it's maybe one of the worst things that could happen. Because it's going to take away what little nutrients there are. So, right now I think we're in a preparation phase for the inevitable year where we get a flood type of rain event.
Yeah, this is the second season of wildflower growth in this section, and what we're noticing is that already the native grasses are starting to express a lot more here, and they're starting to stabilize these steep slopes going into the pond. And it's not really a sealed pond, it's just a pond dug into bedrock and caliche. So this is an ephemeral pond or an in-soaking pond that's actually charging up the local water table and potentially even getting down into the aquifers eventually. So everything downslope from here is getting some extra water, and it's really hard to get stuff to establish on these steep slopes in full sun. So again, this is just another place where I'm really happy to see that there's anything growing here, let alone native bunch grasses and wildflowers.
All right, so there's a home being constructed right here, and this is just another example of all the runoff from the disturbance that is occurring just from creating shelter, creating infrastructure for human society. If we pair that with infiltration techniques, with water harvesting techniques, all this water would have been lost. And we have it right here being captured. So that's really cool to see. It has rained recently, but not that much. I think a lot of this is just capturing runoff from construction projects. And something that I'd like to see us do more with developments over time is thinking about not just drainage, but water infiltration when we're doing new constructions of any kind.
There's a little bit of bluebonnet in there, but all these other guys are just going off like faster than the bluebonnets can.
Yeah, there's some a basket flower that's blooming. This wine cup is almost waist high, which is cool. Monarda, bee balm, one of my favorite wildflowers, and I've been experimenting using it as a spice as well. It's kind of like oregano, but I actually take this right now as a tincture every day. It's really good for balancing and remediating your own body of mycotoxins. So if you have, mold issues or there's mold in your house, taking a tincture or making a strong tea out of this bee balm is something you should consider doing. I was taught that by an herbalist here, Ginger Webb.
Standing cypress is one of my favorite wildflowers. I've never seen it do this before.
Yeah. Usually it takes 2 years to get to that stage.
Yeah, usually it stays about like 4 to 6 inches tall year one, and then year two it gets 6 feet tall and it puts on these beautiful blooms and attracts all the hummingbirds. And this one just skipped that slower year, it seems like, which is amazing.
Yeah, I don't even know how that's possible. That's awesome. And hummingbirds love this plant. Yeah.
Wow, holy cow. I mean, these bundle flowers, so beautiful. Or not bundle flower.
Basket flower.
Basket flower, that's what
Yeah.
it is. I always do that.
Little like basket heads here.
And more standing cypress about to bloom. I mean, it's not just this one standing cypress, it's all of them. They're all going to bloom already.
Yeah, and look at this wine cup right here. This wine cup is huge. Wine cup's one of my favorites. I don't eat them too often because they're just so pretty, but the flower is edible and the roots are actually edible too. I haven't tried the roots yet, and I'm not going to disturb this one to do so, but this is very big. I mean, I often see them kind of just like this tall.
And this is completely unirrigated. And as you drive down the roads right now, Tech Stop plants a bunch of wildflowers. You do not see all of these wildflowers on the side of the road anywhere right now based on the rainfall that we've had. Yeah. And even if you just look right on the other side of the berm, like this is healthy because we did seed this, but look at the difference between that native ground right there and then where we put down the seed mix and the amendments and everything more heavily. I'm kind of shocked at all the brassica cover crops that are growing on this steep rocky hillside right here.
Yeah, that's cool.
I've never seen that before. I think that must have been because y'all sprayed it on and it's just stuck to the side. But even so, like, how is it getting enough water to grow right there? I guess that's forage collards.
Yeah, it looks like forage collards.
And then some triticale.
I mean, people can see this is just straight rock that it's growing out of, pretty much. I mean, caliche and rock, but.
Yeah, and that slope is so steep that like water is not soaking in on it very well. But these things are growing. I think it's really interesting to see what different kinds of native plants are self-selecting, because there were native grasses in this mix. And in some places where the ground is less disturbed, the native grasses are taking faster. But where we've got more disturbance, it seems like the wildflowers are coming in so strong to start that ecosystem succession process. So I'm so happy that we live in a place where the ecosystem succession process can be so beautiful.
I know, I think it was Taylor at Rome Ranch asking me, what is it about wildflowers, that kind of start that ecological succession? And my kind of off the cuff feeling was it's almost like the land is calling, not just like, the foundation of the ecosystem, which is insects, but calling attention to, a need for remediation into this area. And it's amazing how it's just this like dazzling display. And then over time, you actually get more grasses coming in.
I know a lot of people are starting to keep bees for wildlife exemption or agricultural tax exemptions, but a lot of times there's not enough forage for the bees in the 2-mile radius that they forage in certain times a year especially. And so people end up having to feed them a lot of sugar water, and then that is not great for them and their immune system, and then they start to have pest problems. So I think if more people could do some land remediation along with getting the bees for the ag exemption, then they would have a better result. And of course it would be beautiful as well. I mean, there's bees all over the place here.
It's in the Malpighia family, which is like, that is like you know the flowers on that, you know them anywhere, because all the flowers look the same, or it's the same morphology. It's really unique, you know, like the same way all milkweeds have the same general flower morphology. But that's a great plant. Nobody's fucking growing that. Same thing. Like if you're really into Texas natives and you just kill your lawn, you're like, I really want to grow all the cool natives. Like this has a specialist bee that hits it. And without, you lose this plant, you lose the bee. It's just like a Jenga tower. Everything starts coming down. But like, say you kill your lawn, you're like, I want to grow Galphimia. Where the fuck you can't get anywhere because no one grows it. Because people still want, that's the thing, you got to change the culture. Like, people still want all this hideous Home Depot shit. This fucking, just, ugh. Like, why? Like, that's not beautiful. This is beautiful. This evolved here. This is tied to the fucking land here. Sweet, thank you. Thank you, dog. Come on, man. Come on. All right. You're sweet, but at the same time, it smells like kind of bad. But like, we don't have a wholesale nursery in Texas that's growing like really, like we got this place called Pizzo after Jack Pizzo in the Chicago, and he grows all these fucking dope native prairie plants that nobody else grows, and he grows them in really good soil in deep tubes, and there's nobody doing that in Texas. And that's what we fucking need, man. But it takes knowledge and money.
It's funny, man, because we've tried doing more in some ways as far as like irrigating and, we've tried different methods, I'll say, to get wildflower meadows established, and this is definitely just the most successful one I've ever seen.
This is the Edwards Plateau. There's so much shit that only grows in the Edwards Plateau. You go too far, you go to the east, it gets more rainfall, more humid. All the adaptations that it needs on this thin soiled limestone are going to be maladaptive in the Blackland Prairie or wetter areas. And then you go far west, it's too fucking dry. It's your Chihuahua Desert now. So this is like a very strict, it's like an island. The Edwards Plateau is like an island in the center of Texas, in an ocean where it's of much different habitat on either side. No soil. This isn't soil. This is limestone powder. This is calcareous powder. Like, this is all you can grow. Or I guess like stuff that's from a similar geology, 5,000 miles away or wherever, we also get this limestone. But this stuff is like, this is Texas. And like, for a state that's always talking about how proud it is, etc., well, then why do you plant all this non-native garbage? Why are you planting crepe myrtles? They evolved in more mesic forests in Asia. Why would you plant those here? Thank you, that's very sweet. Let's go stand over here. But you got a nice haircut, you know that? You got a really nice haircut. I can tell you get groomed. He's a sweet dog. But that's what I don't understand, and I don't think it's not like, it's never malicious, it's just ignorance. Okay, well, we're gonna tell you why this is cool, This isn't weeds, this isn't brush, this is stuff that evolved here, that is specialized here. Why? Because it's evolved here over hundreds of thousands of years. Trying to plant crepe myrtles or Kentucky bluegrass or whatever garbage from somewhere else is an uphill battle. It doesn't make any sense. Look at this, man. This is not soil. This is like porous calcareous rock. All right, so not only is it like mechanically really hard to grow in because there's no soil, it's chemically really hard to grow in too. You get calcium toxicity unless you've evolved here. Like this Stillingia has a giant root in the ground. Why? Because it gets 100 degrees here and it sometimes won't rain for a few weeks and everything dies because you're basically growing on concrete. But this thing has evolved this big tuberous root that goes a foot or two into the ground. And if it goes through a drought, it just says, all right, whatever, I'll just close up shop, roll down the shutters and wait it out. And then it does that, and then it gets some more rain, then it sends these up again, and it's good to go. And it's got this big storage root that it can die back to, and it's fine. But like all this stuff that is not from a climate like this can't do that. So, and also, like this Galphimia, this has specialist bees that pollinate it. They're not getting nectar, they're not getting pollen, they're getting oils. It produces oils in the flowers. And the bees collect oil and feed it to their young. Almost none of the other plants do that. They're all producing, that are here, even the natives, they're all producing, pollen or sugar, right? But so you get rid of this thing because, someone who doesn't know how important it is just bulldozes the land and wants to put in Kentucky bluegrass and crepe myrtles and oleander. Well, now you've not only wiped out this plant, you've wiped out the bee that depends on it and maybe some other cool insects that depend on that, some parasitoid wasps and maybe some other birds that depend on it, and so on and so on. It just keeps going up. And soon you've just created the equivalent of a Dollar General, just this monotonous, homogenized, sterilized store, in your backyard. You've created nature's equivalent of like a Dollar General or a whatever. It's brutal, man. And it's all just because people don't know how to appreciate this. I don't know how you could look at this and think it's just weeds. But there's people out there that do that, Whereas I look at like crepe myrtles and most like strip mall landscaping and I'm like, that's garbage. Like that, if a bulldozer went over that, I wouldn't care. That'd be hilarious, This is the stuff that's, because there's context for it. All this stuff is dope. It's all cool. It's all specific to Texas. It's all specific to the Edwards Plateau.
Yeah. And that ties into something I'm passionate about too, which is like, I try to eat 80% of my food within this bioregion. And like specifically, not just Texas, but in the Everest Plateau. Yeah. And I think part of that is, like you said, like tying yourself back to place and appreciating like the coevolutionary history of the ecology and seeing yourself as a participant of that. And also having some like reciprocity with the environment around us.
Or a relationship with it, yeah. It's wild to not have a relationship to land. Like hundreds of thousands of years of our evolution as a species, we had a direct connection to the plants and other life around us. And now we don't. Now our relationship is to like CVS Pharmacy or Starbucks or, Chick-fil-A or parking or Toyota or Ford or like all these brand names that don't, I mean, it's fine. You could do that, but have a connection to this too. Like know what the plants are. They're literally the reason you're able to live here. If none of this stuff grew here, you wouldn't be able to live here. It would just be rocky, barren desert. And there'd be no life, there'd be no birds waking you up in the morning. It would just be a bleak, soulless shithole.
There wouldn't be any air.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so the amendments that we did on this one was just basalt rock dust, biochar, and we sprayed it with a biofertilizer that was based on EM1. And that, we got a big water trail out here and we like had a fire hose just like soak everything down. But that's it. Pretty simple. And then first grind ramial chips, mulch. So mulch that hasn't, been broken down is actually breaking down and releasing those nutrients in place. And when it gets rained on, it creates humic acid that also starts to kind of separate the caliche particles over time and create more space for oxygen, which is important for microbial growth and for the mobility of minerals and nutrients in the soil.
I honestly don't know. The weather pattern has been interesting. So when we first made these terraces, these berms, and then seeded it, we got rain that sprouted everything. But then, and we had a pretty wet early summer, so I think that was helpful. But it was really towards the end of that, I think, that we got these seeded. But the fact that it sprouted right away, that it got the right amount of rain, definitely helps a lot. But then, oddly, we've had a really dry fall and winter, and even a pretty dry spring. So it's not like these have had a ton of water. So I really can't, I'm gonna have to leave it to Chris and Adam to help me figure out how we replicate this result every single time. Because I've got projects myself where I've tried to start a wildflower meadow out in Fredericksburg, much smaller than this, and I'm not getting these results. And I'm like, if I could, that would be great.
Yeah. I would say I am noticing that the amendments, I think, are making a difference. I think using the first grind is better than using the double grind because the double grind often creates this kind of impermeable mat all over the surface over time. And I think you're losing out on those nutrients that they've kind of pre-broken down for you at the landscaping yard, like being released into the soil. And I think overseeding, I think we did 4 times the seeding rate. And then, like Michael said, water, and I think honestly intention as well. Like one of the things I love about Adam is he's pretty adamant about doing a prayer or doing some sort of, kind of more metaphysical acknowledgement of what are we doing here, why are we doing this? And, call me crazy and people have all different kinds of feelings on it, but I think that's an important element of it is what is actually the intention behind the action.
What about the seeding? Like, what was the order of operations? So we built the terraces, and then we put, did we put down the amendments first and like fold them in?
Yeah, so the basalt was laid like in the area that we had flagged out to create these terraces. So then, or sorry, in the swale. So as we're digging the swale out, the basalt gets worked into the caliche. And then we topped it with biochar, seeded it all, raked it in, put the mulch down, and then we seeded on top of the mulch again, and then we sprayed it with the biofertilizer using this like 500-gallon water trailer. We just came out with like a fire hose.
Okay, so some seed on top of the amendments, but under the mulch, and then some seed on top of the mulch.
Yes.
That's interesting. And then this was actually an early version of our soil amendment blend, right? So this isn't even like the fully formed final product yet, right?
Yeah.
This was just straight biochar, but you inoculated it.
It was inoculated and it was mixed by the way that we built these berms with the basalt.
Okay.
So the thing that it's missing is the vermicompost, although from our first video we did have that in the other berms. We didn't do it this time around, I don't think. And then the chicken manure as well was missing.
Which maybe the wildflowers don't need that much nutrients anyway.
Yeah, maybe as we go over there, we might see more grasses. It'll be interesting to see how they differ in that. But yeah, this is kind of like a proto version of the mix as well that we spread here. That's really all there is to it. Just this is a huge wine cup. And that's pretty amazing.
It's usually a very delicate, like what, 12 inch tall
Yeah.
little guy that spreads on the ground, and these are like reaching up towards the sky more so.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of an interesting thing, just like the morphology of plants, and something that I'm noticing more, which is them growing differently, and actually I feel like having like a decent diversity in their size and their shape and their growth patterns based off the context that they're growing in. So when you see them in this like healthy wildflower stand, you know, they're kind of growing more straight up, and they're getting this like vertical pattern that I don't normally see. And it kind of reminds me of my old place I used to live, where it was kind of thick with juniper and oak, and they were all growing like straight up, right? Whereas when you clear the area, the oaks like kind of grow in this more umbrella pattern, and that's partially to protect themselves from the wind. But yeah, just the more different contexts that we're exploring, the more I see plants growing in kind of weird and surprising ways.
So, hey puppy. So when I put my hand here under the wildflowers, this is licking the mic. All right, buddy, that's the little one. So yeah, when I move my hand from out here into this thicket of wildflowers, I can sense a temperature change. I don't know how many degrees it is, but it's sensible. I can only imagine that through the summertime, that's gonna keep the soil so much cooler than bare ground, or even where there's only 50% cover.
Yeah, and I'm still feeling like a little bit of moisture in here as well.
Chris, what was the ratio of like cover crop seeds to native seeds that you guys did in here? Do you remember?
I'd have to look, honestly. I'd have to go back and look at the budget, but mostly natives for sure.
Because I see some cover crops, but they're getting out-competed, which is usually the opposite.
Yeah.
Usually the cover, and maybe they came up last summer and grew through a cycle, and these are just the reseeds, but...
Yeah, they're kind of transitioning out too, because I think we only did a fall cover crop.
Okay.
So they should be waning.
Yeah, but sometimes when we've had the right rainfall, like these sprout in the fall, and then they're like dominant right now, this time of year, which can be good.
Yeah, I think we learn from kind of past projects and definitely put a minority of cover crops in the mix so that there's some cover, you know, in case the wildflowers decided this isn't the year they want to come up. And maybe if they didn't, we would have cover cropped again just to protect the soil. But luckily, in this case, it worked out where the natives were really the dominant thing.
So we plant a lot of yarrow from starts, from 4-inch and 1-gallon starts, but this is probably the healthiest yarrow plant I've ever seen growing from seed here. And of course it's gonna make more seeds and then spread. And for some reason, this particular section, there's an extra population of bees just pollinating away.
Yeah, just if anyone doesn't know, that yarrow is, you know, an ancient medicine and very widely used. One of the cool things about it is if you get a cut, you know, you can pull off one of these leaves, I like chew it up in my mouth and use it as a poultice, they call it, and it's an astringent. And I'm forgetting the technical term, but it stops bleeding pretty effectively. And I've used it like in situations where the closest thing to me was actually yarrow and I didn't have a Band-Aid, and it's really effective. It's used topically as well and internally.
So we're back over here on the first side, or the first phase of the project, where we did these terraces and then seeded, and you can see on the other side that got seeded last summer that the wildflowers are still waist tall. Here we're starting to move more into native grasses, but you can still see so clearly this is what we started with 18 months ago, and now this is what we're moving towards. And I think one of the lessons here that I want people to consider is that a lot of times what we want to do is we want to get an ecosystem succession process to a certain phase in that process, and then we want to freeze it there. So people want to have a wildflower meadow forever, but that's not really how it works. The wildflowers prepare the ground for native grasses, and then sure, you'll still have a mix of native grasses and wildflowers in the right conditions. But anytime that we try to freeze ecological succession where it is, we're just going to be fighting nature, we're going to be spending energy, time, and money, and it's ultimately going to be a losing battle anyway. So all the berms and swales or conservation terraces here are connected and drain into these little ephemeral ponds. There's 4 ephemeral ponds on the property, and they have not been sealed. And we've really only had about an inch of rain over the last like 2 or 3 weeks, I think it's been. And you can see there's water in here, there's frogs in here, there's all sorts of other life that's coming here. There's a bird. And you know, just whenever you bring more water into the landscape, you bring more life into the landscape.
This is functioning like a little vernal pool. So it's a shallow, you know, kind of wetland feature that's going to increase biodiversity on the property, different types of organisms that favor this environment. And that just general complexification of your environment is going to help with the fertility of the entire land and add to the beauty of it. And also, not everything is transactional. It's not all about what we can get out of it. It's just great that we're creating a habitat for other organisms that are perfect just as they are, just existing.
So making a pond doesn't have to be this big thing. You can have a very, very small pond. It can be unsealed. It's not going to be wet year round, but you don't have to make it, you know, this big expensive project. You can build something like this, an ephemeral pond, in a day with a small excavator and a skid steer. So I'd love for people to just keep that in mind, because you can capture so much water for the amount of energy and time spent on something like this. The return on water capture and then the ecosystem gaining from that extra water, I think it's a really good trade-off.
You know, a lot of people get frustrated, understandably, when ponds are leaking or when they're not holding water. But if you create a pond and it's unlined and it's in-soaking into the ground is thirsty. That's exactly what the ground needs, is a catchment feature that is going to be, you know, allowing water to percolate through down into the water table. So it's one of the trade-offs with a lined pond, which there's absolutely a place for, but one of the big trade-offs is usually you're lining it with plastic, and that's going to have some, you know, hormonal disruption effect on the environment. And then it's also not actually able to in-soak, because most of the time you're keeping the pond full, it looks nice, but when it rains, you have 100% runoff. There's no catchment. So having these ephemeral features, I think from a cultural perspective, it's important for us to appreciate that and understand it, and not want to always have something be in a certain state, as we were mentioning earlier with the ecology.
All right, so a lot of people are concerned about us capturing a bunch of runoff in the highlands and soaking it into the ground, and they're afraid that that's going to rob the creeks and streams and rivers and everything else in the system of the water. But what I really want to share with those people, the way that I understand how the system works, is we soak it into the highlands, and that's how it was when the ecosystem was healthier anyway, because there was just more soil, more surface area, more beavers as well. And so when we soak it in, that water travels underground, and sure, some of it gets used by microbes and plants and it evapotranspirates and helps it rain, but some of it stays in the ground, and when it hits a more limiting layer, it starts to travel out, and then it pops out in seep springs where there's an inflection point where the slope becomes less steep. You'll see the water seeping out, and we've seen it here on this particular project. When there's a lot of rainfall, but underneath each berm, there's a like a seep spring across the whole berm, and just the ground is wet. And so the water isn't being robbed from the system, it's just being slowed down. So it's like a pinball machine where you want the ball to hit as many things as possible. That's what we're doing with the water. We want it to move through the system as slowly as possible so it can benefit the system as much as possible, instead of running off quickly into the streams, creeks, and rivers, carrying with it our soil and other forms of runoff that are actually pollutants when they're moving into those bodies of water too quickly.
Just learn the genus name. And like a friend of mine was like, no, it's gatekeeping. That's making it. It's not gatekeeping at all. You give people the benefit of the doubt. You teach them a genus name. Whereas if you refuse to use it because you're afraid it's going to intimidate people, they're never going to learn. Or like there's a plant called like dwarf peony or some shit. Another completely ridiculous name. There's no peonies that are native to Texas. There's only 2 and they're in North America, and they're in California. And it's not a peony at all, it's an Accordia species. Well, guess what? There's like 3 other Accordia species we get here. You teach people the genus Accordia, it's fucking 7 letters. It's not like a, you know, and then they also will know the other species when they see, oh, the flowers look identical on the, you know what I mean? So, what is this Melanthiaceae thing again?
We were trying to figure out what that was
I've seen, I forgot the genus name.
It's like, common name was like Texas feather or something.
Oh, fuck that. But this is cool because, like, yeah, with INAT, like every plant I meet, I'll be like, all right, what family it's in, and then I know because you know the flower morphology of a family. Like I know that is Melanthiaceae, which is in the order Liliales. It's a family I'm familiar with. It's got fucking hundreds of species in it. I see them all over the world, but I can't remember the genus name. So then I go to INAT and I type in, yeah, what is that thing in Melanthiaceae that is in Texas that I've seen before? Sheenacolon texanum, right on, cool. You know, same family as Trillium and Melanthium, the corn lilies, all that shit, yeah. Sheenacolon, yeah, that's cool. I can't believe that I don't see people growing that either, man. It's a big genus and there's a bunch of different, you see one, you know, you see another one in Florida. It doesn't look just like this, but it looks similar. It's got the same flower structure. It's like a weird spike with the female flowers on the bottom, the male on the top, and glabrous leaves. And you're like, okay, yeah, I could see that's also a Stillingia. That's why I'm like everyone, like the genus name, like I'll forget species names all the time, but I'm like, oh yeah, that's Stillingia. And then if I need to look at the species name, I just look it up on the,
Right.
Should I not curse so much? You probably not, because
Cat's out of the bag on that one.
well, it's Texas, you know, we gotta be a little, you know, we get some people get a little uptight.
So I just pulled this thistle flower up, and thistle is, this type of thistle is invasive in the area, which is a larger conversation I look forward to having one day. But I will say that I love making tea out of this flower head. It's like one of the best tasting teas. It's good for your liver, and it's also a great pollinator support plant. A lot of people in the hill country that have bees, they struggle to have a honey harvest. Like the bees pretty much just make as much honey as they can for their own needs. There's not enough excess to share with the landowner. But places where there are large stands of thistles, typically you're able to get a honey harvest from that. So just introducing a little bit of nuance to the conversation around, you know, invasive plants versus native plants. What we aim for is mostly native plants, but personally I think invasives will always be a part of every ecosystem because every ecosystem is always evolving in some way. And so invasive is just one term, but pioneering or you know, early successional plants is another way of looking at them. They're indicators telling you about the health of the environment, and they're also showing you what kind of niches are open and, you know, what kinds of actions you might need to take to improve the overall fertility of the landscape.
So this is ragweed, and it's one of the most hated plants because it is an allergen and it grows fast and it produces a lot of seeds, so it tends to colonize areas quickly. For me, I would much rather see this than some other plants because there's no thorns. I'm personally not allergic to it, so that helps. And it just creates a lot of biomass. I've seen these get 6 feet tall, and it's not that hard to chop it down or pull it out. So the way I would manage ragweed is I would let it get big, and then I would just chop and drop it as mulch. Maybe even cut and carry it. I believe it has a really high protein content, and you can feed it. I think in some places it's called pigweed because pigs love to eat it. So as long as your livestock can digest it, you could also just feed it to livestock and then get the fertility out of it that way.
So one thing about ragweed, as someone who is very sensitive to allergens in the environment, you can make a tincture out of the leaves of this. So that means you're submerging it in alcohol or glycerin, And taking that every day helps to acclimate your body to the pollen that it's going to produce. And it actually produces pollen around the same time as juniper. So sometimes people are misattributing like an allergy to juniper when really ragweed is just as much of a difficult particle, like the pollen particles are difficult for us to manage in our systems. So that's one thing that you can do with it is take this, make a tincture out of it, and help prepare yourself for the pollen that it releases later on in the year. Yeah, here's some horehound. There was a lot more of it when we first started this project. That was one of the things that was growing here. But this plant is also been used for, hundreds or thousands of years as a medicinal. And I've used it personally for sore throats in particular. It's making a tea out of it. Sometimes I'll just chew on the leaves. It's extremely bitter. I would say it's unpleasant, but it's effective. And it's also a pretty plant. So just wanted to highlight that it's growing here. Evening primrose, often seen on the side of highways. This is another ancient medicinal plant, often used for hormonal health, for women's health in particular, anti-inflammatory. Also used just as a nervous system soothing agent. Something that's kind of lesser known is the roots are actually edible of this, kind of like carrots, and it's a great pollinator.
What's that called?
Thamnosma. It's got, like most plants, it's got a completely stupid common name that makes people dumber by learning it. But if you learn the genus Thamnosma, and then you're ever in Southern California, you'll see the related species Thamnosma montana, which has the same flower shape and the same fruit shape. You can see it looks like a little ass. And it's got little dots on it. Those are punctate oil glands. There's also Thamnosma, there's a Thamnosma species I saw in Namibia, which looks like just the same, but it's bigger and it's like a 3-foot tall plant, whatever. And the flowers are like these little cupped things. But this thing is awesome. Yeah, they smell really, really good. And they can get like that big. I didn't know you guys got them up here. I guess I did. I think this is like the northern extent of their range. That's a fucking dope plant too. And it's another one of those plants that's got the flowers that the oil collecting bees associate with.
What's this one called again?
This is called Chromaria. This is Chromaria lanceolata. I don't know what the common name is. Don't learn it. It will actively make you dumber. But if you learn the genus Chromaria, then you'll see there's 2 other Chromaria species in Texas. One in the Peyote Gardens, one in West Texas. They've got the exact same flower morphology, kind of looks like an orchid, but it's in the same order as creosote bush. But the flowers are fucking insane, and they've got oil glands on them because they're not offering nectar or pollen to bees, they're offering oil.
So it's parasitizing right here?
It's parasitizing the Scutellaria maybe, or maybe one of the grasses, yeah, but it doesn't really harm it. And it's such a dope plant. I fucking love this genus. There's one in Chile I saw. There's a shrub Chromaria in Nuevo Leon, only 300 miles south of here. Yeah, I'll show you what the flowers look like up close. You can see the ovary and the flowers. Yeah, see, it looks like almost like an orchid-like.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
And those petals up there are where the oil is produced. So the bee goes in to get that and then gets dusted on its abdomen with pollen. Actually, maybe the oil gland's in the center, I forget. But yeah, this is cool. I don't see many more here.
What was the purpose again for the oil being released by the flower?
To get the pollinators in there. That's what entices the pollen. And then these are the fruits. They're like sticky or spiny. There's some that have like these Velcro-like appendages on them. But I definitely collect those when they're turning brown, because that's a cool one. Again, nobody grows it. Yeah, there's some nice stuff on this property. It's cool.
Yucca, an iconic plant of the hill country. And when I first was learning about the uses of this plant, it was described to me as a masta plant because it can produce fire, shelter, and food. So from the shelter perspective, it's a great fiber source. Sandals were historically made out of the leaves. Rope can be made out of the leaves after they've been processed, which is beyond the scope of this conversation, but can be done. And the stalks can be used to create fire, to do hand drill fires. The flowers are edible, although I'm not a huge fan of them, to be honest. I've tried lots of different ones. I think certain people like myself might have a gene where it tastes particularly soapy, because I've also had friends that do like the taste of it. Sometimes I'll kind of suffer through it because I think it might have like an anti-parasitic effect, which brings us to the root of the plant, which can be used to create soap. So you pull up the plant, it does kill the plant to harvest the root. So be mindful of that when you're harvesting it. But oftentimes you can find these in some pretty big stands, and you basically pound up the root and it creates these saponins, and it creates these suds in the water, and you can use it for shampoo, for cleaning, and it's actually a surfactant. So sometimes I'll add that to compost teas, and it's like a wetting agent. It helps to evenly distribute whatever it is that you're spraying out. It breaks up the water surface tension. So yeah, also great. I think it's a good pollinator for bats in particular, but just a beautiful native, classic kind of southwestern plant. It's such an important thing too, because so much of our solutions are technologically based, whereas I feel like there's a big part of it which is also just like social, like cultural norms and the cultural technologies that we have and the relationship that we have to the environment. Because that's the limiting factor for the infinite progress narrative. It's like, people don't think about that, even myself. It's like every time you're putting in a query into AI, it's like, it's using water.
Yeah.
You know, it's taking away from ecological resources. And I don't think that's necessarily bad, but it's like, okay, this story about regeneration needs to be as popular, if not more popular, than the story of extraction.
Yeah, and taking, yeah.
And also, I said it kind of earlier, like this shit is also just cool. Like, it's awesome. I just want to see like thriving ecosystems.
Yeah, everything is tight, man. Like, look at that plant. Like, these leaves are covered in wax. They've reduced their surface area. They're super narrow. It's built for this climate. That's the thing I always try to impress upon people. It's like, man, just the pragmatism of this is real. Like, even if you think whatever, you know, someone's argument would be, oh, the tree, it's stupid. It's just, a lot of people, I mean, I'm used to people just viewing plants as like background filler, which is a shit for brain take, but whatever, to each their own. I'm trying to meet people where they're at. But like, even if you feel that way, like this is still just a pragmatic, I mean, like the swamp cooler effect of plants. The stomata on the leaves release water vapor when it goes from a liquid to a gas that takes heat energy, it cools the landscape. The exact opposite of the urban heat island. And a lot of people don't think about that because it's not their day-to-day life. I get it, whatever. But like, that is just a pragmatic, you know, that's just, don't you want a cooler landscape, or do you want to live on like, you know, what's essentially a parking lot that radiates heat until 3 in the morning, you know, after the sun goes down, which is what, this shouldn't be a political thing. Like, it's not left or right. Like, caring about where you live and the life that lives there is just a human thing. It's your job as a human being to take good care of the land you live on, you know?
This is a project that I'm really proud of and grateful to be a part of, and all the people that, you know, were a part of this to make this happen. Shout out to Adam especially for being out here, and to Pete Van Dyke as well for teaching me about earthworks and for doing some of these earthworks. And I mean, I think this is really what it's all about. Like, coming in and actually being able to see, you know, sometimes there's this period where it's like, I think we're doing all the right things. I think we're, you know, approaching this in an intelligent manner, but you don't know. You know, there's some degree of risk that you're taking. And this is incredibly validating to see water actually being, you know, held on the property, not running off, to see just a crazy profusion of biodiversity here, all different types of insects being supported. You know, I want to do this all over the hill country. You know, one of the things that I think we're taking away from this project is also the power of paramagnetic basalt dust, the power of biochar, these like low intervention, in my opinion, these upcycled materials that you're only putting into the soil one time, and focusing on the health of the soil, and you're just capturing the nutrients that are here and appreciating them and storing them. And so I think that, you know, as we move into more projects, we're starting to define like a procedure that I think can be utilized throughout the hill country. Every context is different, every project is different, but there are fundamental principles that work. and that I want to continue to leverage as we're doing new construction and as we are coming in and looking at soil that has everything that's been stripped from it and forming this relationship of reciprocity with the environment. I feel like that's really what we're doing is, not just like focusing on the other side of land use, which is very heavily, I think, based on extraction, like what can we get out of it? But when we add back to it, when we give back to it, I think it's important psychologically, I think it's important physiologically, and it just so happens that it allows you to continue to extract from it in integrity.
All right, hey, thanks guys. Appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to learn more about what we do, how we do it, why we do it, you can hop over to our website. There's tons of good articles. You can join our newsletter. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. We'd love to see you there and answer your questions. Thanks again. Enjoy.